Ladies and gentlemen, what you are currently witnessing is history in the making. Make sure you don't blink because what you guys are currently experiencing is gameplay of the very first quadruple A game in existence, made by none other than Ubisoft themselves. Everybody feast your eyes because this is what the current state of modern AAA live service games looks like.
Sails in sight, Captain! Starboard, Captain!
The ink that covers my skin. Perhaps one day.
That's it! A good start! We need more, Captain! This is only half! Captain, we've got what we needed! Throw these corners! What we are worth! We've nearly got them! That will show them! Not to mess with us!
But seriously though, this growing trend within the AAA games industry needs to be stopped. If games like this are what we have to look forward to in the future, then I fear what the games industry is going to look like 5 to 10 years from now, because this right now is just sad. And this problem has started to become more and more trendier over the recent years, with so many big publishers trying to get their cut of the live service pie. They are trying so hard to break into this niche that it actively becomes a detriment to their games, their studios, and most importantly, their bottom line, because most of these games end up failing. Games as a service was once a risky business practice to even attempt, but now it's the hip, cool trend that every developer and their grandmothers wants to hop on. According to this article from Polygon, Sony had just announced in a recent financial call that they're planning to release 12 live service games for the PlayStation within the next 2 years, and 6 of them are expected to be released by next year. This is just from Sony, mind you. Who knows what live service games the other publishers are planning to release within the next 2 years. It is an understatement to say that this games as a service market is way too oversaturated and way too bloated right now. Just to name a few, there's Fortnite, Apex Legends, Warzone, League of Legends, Diablo 4, Overwatch 2, Dota 2, CSGO, Destiny 2, Final Fantasy 14, World of Warcraft, Rainbow Six Siege, and so many more that I'll take an eternity to list out. And all of these games are vying for your constant attention all the time because they're meant to be played forever in order to survive. Now add on top of this all the recent live service games that just released, and now we have a situation where there's simply too many to keep track of. The current state of the games as a service market is simply unsustainable, not because there isn't enough money to sustain it, but because people just don't have enough time to spend on all of these games, especially if they have an absolutely terrible launch. A live service game having a horrible opening week is almost a death sentence for these type of games, because usually the first week of a game's launch is going to be the peak of its concurrent player count. And if its opening week is bad, then the game is probably already making its way to the chopping block. Let's take a look at some examples of these failed AAA live service games, shall we? First we have Marvel's Avengers, which peaked at around 31,000 players on release. Admittedly, that is a pretty decent amount of players to keep a game alive, but unfortunately the game just couldn't hold that player count, as the game would lose about 90% of its player base by the next month, and eventually leading to its complete server shutdown 3 years later. A more recent example of this is with the Suicide Squad game, where the game had a peak of about 13,000 players on launch, which is significantly lower than the Avengers. And to no one's surprise, the player count dropped off a cliff to less than 1,000 players just 1 month after launch. The writing is on the wall with this game with how poorly received it was by everyone, and I for one would not be surprised if Suicide Squad shuts down in the near future. Now there are some games that fall into the exception of having a bad launch, yet are currently performing amazingly right now, like No Man's Sky or Rainbow Six Siege or Final Fantasy 14. But these are just exceptions, not the norm. These games only became popular because the developers took the hit in time, money, and reputation in order to fix them over the next several years. It's already difficult as it is to produce a finite single-player video game that players are meant to pick up and put down after a few hours. But with the live service title, you would also have to worry about server stability because they are always online, which many AAA titles are still struggling with to this very day. And on top of that, the difficulty of trying to make a compelling gameplay loop that'll keep players returning over and over for long periods of time. And as if those weren't enough to deter studios, you also have to constantly keep adding content to the game frequently so that players don't leave. It's an insanely tall order for a studio to have to keep up with all of these demands. And with all of these obstacles in the way, you'd have to be crazy to want to develop a live service game in this day and age, because failing to keep up with even one of these demands can legitimately kill your game. So why are a lot of game publishers trying to get their grubby little hands into the game as a service market even though there's a high likelihood of failure within 2 years? Why can't they just make a single player title and be done with it like so many developers such as FromSoft, Larian, Atlas, etc.? Well, you probably already know the answer to that question. It's because of money. These studios and publishers see all of their competitors making tons and tons of money from their live service games. It's basically an infinite money printing machine to these out of touch corporate executives and shareholders who have no idea what it takes to make a good live service game. All they see is dollar signs and they think to themselves that they want some of that sweet, sweet nectar. Then they ordain their almighty corporate mandate onto one of their unfortunate development studios that's never made a live service game before to throw away their time and reputation into making a soulless husk of a game that will eventually shut down in 2 to 3 years, if that. Just look what happened to BioWare with Anthem, Crystal Dynamics with Marvel's Avengers, and Rocksteady with Suicide Squad. If life has taught me anything, it's that history always repeats itself. These studios won't be the first to be forced down this dark path, nor will they be the last. Now I want to take this time to discuss why so many developers are trying to go for this infinite money glitch. We obviously know that it's for money, but why are so many executives so desperate to hop into this live service market when they could just make a good single player game? Well, I think it's probably because it's simply too expensive to make games nowadays. It's no secret that a AAA video game budget can go for ludicrous amounts of money. Spider-Man 2's budget was over $300 million, Cyberpunk 2077's budget was over $400 million, and Genshin Impact costed over $700 million to develop. The amount of money that these studios throw into developing these AAA video games is absolutely crazy, and as technology improves, more and more money will be spent producing these games. The problem with this is that it's simply unsustainable. The more money that these studios and publishers spend, the more money that they'll need consumers to pay in order to recuperate the costs. And well, for single player titles, people only need to spend money on them once. So the main source of income is really just from the initial launch week. And hoping to recuperate hundreds of millions of dollars from sales alone in order to just break even is a pretty big ask. Now compare that to the games as a service model where you can charge people full price for the initial sale of the game and you can continually charge them for microtransactions through the in-game cash shop. Publishers could easily get back all of their money and then some if they have even a couple of people willing to regularly shell out a bit more cash for some microtransactions. And you can't really have that in a single player game, so live service seems like the most obvious choice if you just want to make money. Why settle for returning players when you could have returning payers? And unfortunately, this style of game is becoming more and more prevalent within the gaming industry because it simply works. Catering to that small percentage of players that pay more money after they've already paid full price for the game just works. And I mean, let's be honest, would these publishers stop trying to produce these games if it didn't work? I personally don't think so. The thing is, I don't have a problem with the concept of a live service game by itself. Some of my most favorite games of all time are live service games, and there are plenty of good ones that are still releasing today. The first reason why live service games today suck is because of the broken releases. Now, call me entitled all you want, but I think it should be a hard requirement for a game to at least function like it was intended on its release day. And live service games are notorious for launching in broken states. It happens so often that it's become normalized for games today to release and be near unplayable for the first few weeks. Some recent examples of this happening is with Helldivers 2 and Last Epoch, where the servers just couldn't handle the metric ton of people trying to log in on day one, and the game became quite literally unplayable for many people due to the server issues. I'm not saying that these are bad games by any means, because they're not, but I think the consumers have a basic right to at least be able to play the game without any major hiccups. And these games are made by smaller AA studios, so maybe they didn't have the funds or they didn't expect so many people on launch day. But for AAA studios that have an infinitely bigger budget and way better infrastructure should not have the same problems. And this doesn't just apply to server infrastructure, this also applies to bugs and glitches in general. It is absolutely unacceptable for a AAA live service game to be riddled with bugs and glitches on release. But unfortunately, publishers pushing a game out the door way too early and way too underbaked has become a common occurrence in today's day and age. The mindset of launching a game in a broken state now and fixing it later is probably one of the biggest ways live service games fail. To add on to this are the games that launch with an absolutely lethargic amount of content. A most recent example of this is again with the Suicide Squad game that just released about a month ago, and it has some of the worst type of endgame content imaginable for a live service title. I'm talking about the kind of content that forces you to essentially run the same 3 recycled missions over and over again. Suicide Squad was especially horrible with this because for the endgame, all you could really do was the exact same 4 incursions with the same map, same objectives, and only one boss you could fight. That was it. That was all the content the devs expected you to play with for the upcoming months until the brand new season started. And to add salt to the wound, there's a recent patch for this game that completely broke the servers, making it so that many people were quite literally unable to play the game. Yeah, as you can tell, the player base is not very happy with the current state of the game right now, and the player count is quickly dwindling day by day. Now with less than 1,000 concurrent players just 1 month after launch, and this will probably end up on that already long list of failed AAA live service games. And in my opinion, the most cancerous form of AAA games as a service are the ones that are fully priced $60 to $70 titles with an egregious amount of microtransactions within them. Not only do these kinds of games charge you for the premium price of the base version of the game, but they also have the audacity to ask for even more money from the in-game cash shop after you've already purchased the game. One of the worst offenders of this business practice is from none other than Blizzard Entertainment themselves, specifically with Diablo 4, because recently they had just released a horribly overpriced horse mount into their in-game cash shop that cost just as much as the game itself. Yes, this one cosmetic horse mount that doesn't even look that good in the first place is somehow going for $65. To put that into context, that is worth more than Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, and Cyberpunk 2077. The fact that Blizzard thinks that this one virtual skin for your horse is somehow worth more than actual good AAA games on the market is laughable at best and a horrible joke at worst. And not only that, but they also recently asked players if they would be willing to pay over $100 for a Diablo 4 expansion. In what world would the expansion be worth more than the game itself? This expansion would have to be the best one ever in gaming history for Blizzard to even consider charging more money than the game itself, right? I don't think so. I think they're just testing the waters to see how much shit their consumers are willing to eat. And so far, it seems like they're willing to eat a lot. But these are just some examples of titles that tarnish the games as a service model. There are definitely plenty of good live service games out there that don't follow these scummy business practices, mostly within the AA and indie game market. But as far as I'm concerned, the AAA live service games market is just one big miasma of broken launches, greedy monetization, and shallow content. And I would take extreme caution when I hear that a AAA game is going to be a live service. There have been so many bad releases so far that it actually makes me physically ill whenever I hear that a brand new game is going to be this type of business model. That's why this live service trend within the AAA games industry needs to be stopped. But that's just me. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know down below and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content in the future. See ya.